In the heart of a grand mansion, beneath a centuries-old painting, lies a secret no one dared to uncover, until a young black girl's quiet whisper leads a powerful billionaire to a hidden door. Behind it, forgotten voices trapped by time and silence begin to speak, revealing stories of pain, hope, and courage, long buried in shadows. As he unravels the mysteries of his family's dark past, he must confront truths that could shatter his world and heal generations. This is not just a story about a hidden room. It's about the power of listening, remembering, and the whispers that open doors to change everything. The ballroom was glowing with golden lights, the sound of soft music, and the clinking of glasses filling the grand Caldwell mansion. It was a night of luxury, with the city's most powerful people gathered under one roof. Billionaire Marcus Caldwell, dressed in a black tuxedo, stood near a marble staircase, politely nodding at guests. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd, not out of boredom, but habit. He had always been alert, always watching, even at his own events. This was his way of maintaining control. Marcus had grown up in this mansion. Every wall, every corner was familiar. The paintings, sculptures, and even the scent of old wood and expensive cologne brought back memories of childhood. The mansion had been in his family for over a century. He often thought of it as a castle, not just a home. But tonight, something felt different. There was a strange weight in the air, as if something unseen was pressing against him. He brushed it off. Maybe it was just nerves. He was about to announce a billion-dollar donation for children's education. Waiters in black uniforms moved through the crowd carrying silver trays. Celebrities, politicians, and CEOs laughed, drank, and posed for photos. Journalists snapped pictures, catching the glitter and the glam of one of the most exclusive parties of the year. Then, something strange happened. Marcus saw a girl. She was young, maybe 13 or 14. Her skin was dark, her hair tied into two simple braids. She wore a faded blue hoodie and jeans. She stood at the far end of the room near the giant painting of Marcus's great-grandfather. She didn't belong there. Not in that outfit, not without a name tag or invitation. Yet she wasn't afraid. She wasn't even trying to hide. She just stood calmly, staring straight ahead. Marcus's security team noticed her too. Two men in black suits began walking toward her, hands touching their radios. They looked tense. Marcus quickly raised his hand and stopped them. He walked over himself, curious. A child at his event? Uninvited? And not panicking or running? That was unusual. He approached her slowly. The guests kept laughing and talking, unaware of what was going on in that quiet corner of the room. "Are you lost?" Marcus asked gently. His voice was calm but firm. The girl looked up at him. Her eyes were deep and still. Not scared. Not angry. Just full of something heavy. Something that made Marcus feel like she wasn't really a child. She didn't answer his question. Instead, she pointed at the massive painting behind them. "There's a door behind this painting," she said in a quiet voice. "You should open it." Marcus blinked. For a second, he thought he misheard. The painting she pointed to was over 8 feet tall, covered in a thick gold frame. It showed Jonathan Caldwell, Marcus's great-grandfather, sitting in a leather chair, wearing a gray suit and holding a cigar. It had hung in that spot for generations. Everyone in the family had seen it thousands of times. No one had ever said there was anything behind it. "A door?" Marcus asked. The girl nodded. "Yes, there's something behind there, something you need to see." Marcus turned to glance at the painting, then back at her. "Who told you this?" The girl didn't answer. Her expression didn't change. She wasn't trying to convince him. She was just telling him what she knew. Security was still standing nearby, confused and waiting for instructions. Marcus waved them off. "It's fine. She's with me now." He turned back to speak to the girl again. but she was already walking away, disappearing into the crowd before he could say another word. It was like she had vanished. 1 second she was there, and the next, she was gone. He tried to follow her, but the ballroom was too crowded. She had slipped into the sea of people without a trace. For the rest of the evening, Marcus kept scanning the room, hoping to catch another glimpse of the girl. But she never returned. Her words repeated in his mind like a soft echo. "There's a door behind this painting. You should open it." As the night went on, Marcus smiled and shook hands, gave speeches and posed for photos. But his mind wasn't really in the room anymore. He kept thinking about the painting. Why had that girl come here? How did she get in? Why did she point to that painting? What did she mean? When the guests finally left and the staff began cleaning up, Marcus walked back into the ballroom, now silent and empty. The air felt cooler without the crowd. Only the sound of distant footsteps echoed in the large halls. He stood in front of the painting again, staring at the face of his great-grandfather. Jonathan Caldwell had been a legend in the family, wealthy, powerful, and known for growing the family fortune. But there had always been whispers, unspoken things. Marcus remembered once overhearing a conversation between his parents when he was a child, something about secrets best left buried. He hadn't understood back then. Now he wondered. He reached forward and touched the frame. It was heavy and cold. Using both hands, he began lifting the painting off the hooks. It was larger than he remembered, but he managed to move it carefully. The moment the bottom of the frame lifted away from the wall, he saw it. A line. A thin outline of a door. Not painted. Real wood. Hidden behind the portrait for decades. No knob, no keyhole. Just an old wooden panel with a barely visible seam. His breath caught in his chest. The girl had been right. He ran his hand along the edges until he found a slight dip where the wood had worn down. He pressed gently. The panel creaked. Then, with a small pop, it shifted open just a few inches. Enough to feel a breeze from behind it. Marcus froze. His heart was pounding. His mind was racing. How could this be real? How could there be a door in his own home that he had never known about? He stepped back and looked around. The room was still empty. Only silence answered him. Then he reached forward again and pulled the door open slowly. A musty, cold smell poured out. The darkness behind. The door looked thick, like it had been untouched for years. There was no light switch. Just a narrow stone stairway leading downward, like a hidden tunnel beneath the mansion. For a long moment, Marcus stood at the edge of the hidden doorway, staring into the darkness. He didn't know what he would find. He didn't even know if he wanted to know. But the girl's voice stayed in his ears like a whisper. "You should open it." He stepped back and let the painting lean against the wall. Then he reached for his phone, turned on the flashlight, and took the first step into the unknown. Each step creaked under his weight. The air grew colder the deeper he went. Dust floated in the beam of light, thick like smoke. The stairway twisted, down tightly, like it was built to be hidden, not used often. Marcus tried to stay calm, but his hands were shaking. He had built companies, managed billions, made decisions that changed markets, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Nothing in his entire life had felt this real or this terrifying. At the bottom of the stairs, the flashlight landed on a wooden door, smaller than the one upstairs, old and cracked. It was slightly open. He pushed it gently and stepped inside. The room beyond was small, maybe the size of a bedroom. The walls were made of stone. There was an old wooden desk, broken furniture, torn rugs. Chains, actual chains, hung from one wall. A thick ledger sat on the desk, covered in dust. Marcus stood, there, frozen. This was no wine cellar. This was something else, something darker. He reached for the ledger with trembling fingers. The leather cover cracked as he opened it. The pages inside were filled with names, dates, and numbers, transactions, descriptions, ages, prices. He read one line and felt sick. Male. 17. Strong build. Assigned to house labor. Name, Elijah. Status, unpaid. It was a record, dozens of them. Marcus stumbled back, unable to breathe properly. These weren't just notes. These were records of enslaved people. Hidden, tracked, bought, used. He looked around the room again, and this time, it all made sense. The chains, the dust, the silence. Marcus dropped the book. He sat on the floor and held his head in his hands. Everything he had believed about his family, the pride, the wealth, the success, was built on something rotten, something evil. And somehow that girl knew. Somehow she had brought him here. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. Even after leaving the hidden room and closing the secret door behind the painting, his heart wouldn't slow down. His mind kept spinning. He had found something that should not have existed. Something dark, secret, and shameful. His family's past, the beautiful mansion, the portraits, the wealth, it all suddenly felt different, like everything had a hidden meaning he never noticed before. He sat in his study staring at a glass of water he wasn't drinking. Outside, the city lights blinked through the tall windows, but he didn't see them. All he could see in his mind was that narrow stairway, the cold room, the dusty ledger full of names and numbers, and the chains on the wall. And above it all, the voice of the girl. "There's a door behind this painting." Who was she? How did she know about the hidden door? And more importantly, why him? He knew he had to go back down. He had opened the door, but he hadn't explored everything. He had panicked and rushed out too fast. Part of him had hoped it was all a nightmare. But it wasn't. The truth was there, hidden deep in the house he thought he knew. So the next morning, before anyone else was awake, he returned to the ballroom. The painting still leaned against the wall, and the door behind it was still open. It felt strange to see it in daylight. The light made the doorway look less scary, but somehow more real. It was no longer a mystery. It was a fact. This time, he brought a flashlight and a notebook. He also brought gloves and a camera. He didn't know exactly why, but something inside him told him to record everything. He stepped through the doorway and began walking down the spiral stairs again. The air felt cooler today, but not as terrifying. Maybe he had already faced the worst of it, the shock of discovery. Now he just needed answers. When he reached the bottom, he opened the small door and stepped into the secret room once more. It smelled old and sour, like dust, mold, and sadness. The chains on the wall looked even worse in the bright beam of his flashlight. Some were still bolted into the stone. He noticed worn leather straps on the floor, old restraints, like something from a prison. He moved slowly, touching nothing at first. Then he approached the wooden desk again. The ledger book was still there. He opened it and started from the beginning. The handwriting was neat but cold. Every line was about a person. Their name, age, gender, and sometimes a short comment. Strong arms, good worker, quiet. Each entry had a number beside it, clearly a price. Marcus's stomach turned. These weren't just records, they were business notes. His ancestors had written about human beings as if they were tools or property. One entry caught his eye. Elijah H., 17. Brought in from Georgia. Assigned to cell number 2. Quiet, obedient, no family recorded. 1856. Marcus whispered the name to himself. Elijah. Something about it felt heavy, like that name wanted to be remembered. He looked around the room again. In the corner, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. A small door, half covered by a broken bookshelf. He pushed the shelf aside, the wood groaning loudly. Behind it was a narrow door with rusted hinges. This door was different. It had scratches on the bottom, like someone had tried to claw their way out. He opened it slowly. Inside was a tiny cell. Bare walls. No bed. Just a blanket on the floor, a tin cup, and a Bible with no cover. He stepped inside, heart racing. He had never been in a room like this, never imagined one existed in his own house. And yet, here it was. He picked up the Bible. Inside the front page, someone had written in shaky pencil, "My name is Elijah. I am still a person. God sees me." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. His hand shook as he held the book. This wasn't history in a museum. This wasn't a story from a movie. This was real. Elijah had been here, had slept here, had scratched at this door, had written those words, and Marcus's family had locked him here. Suddenly Marcus realized something even darker. This wasn't just about old history. His family had lived in this house long after slavery was abolished. The last date in the ledger was from the early 1900s. Illegal slavery had continued in secret. The room, the chains, the records, they weren't just leftovers from a cruel time. They were proof of a hidden crime that had lasted much longer than anyone knew. He stepped back out of the cell, breathing heavily. His entire chest felt tight. He turned and began taking photos of everything. The room, the ledger, the chains, the cell. He wanted to document it all, every horrible detail. Not to protect the family, but to expose the truth. He knew now. This had to be made public. As he worked, he thought again about the girl. She had looked so calm, so sure. Not angry, not scared. Just certain. Like she knew this moment would come. And that it needed to happen. He tried to replay the way she looked, her voice, her words, the way she had disappeared. Why would a young girl know about this secret? He returned upstairs, but his thoughts were far below the ground. He searched. The guest list again. No one named Asha. No one who even looked close. Security footage didn't help. Some cameras had strange blind spots that night, as if she had walked through them without being seen. That made Marcus even more curious. Was she real? Was she just a girl? Or something more? That evening he called his lawyer and his family historian. He didn't want silence. He didn't want to cover this up. He wanted to know how deep the truth went. The historian, an older man named Daniel, who had worked for the family for over 30 years, seemed nervous when Marcus told him what he found. Daniel arrived the next morning, pale and shaking. He looked like a man carrying a secret he didn't want to face. "Yes," he said quietly. "I knew there were rumors, but I didn't know there was a room." Marcus showed him the ledger. Daniel sat down, eyes wide. "My grandfather worked here," he whispered. "He said things sometimes about a part of the house no one was allowed to enter. But I thought he was just old and confused." Marcus asked him directly, "Why did no one tell me? Why did no one ever mention this?" Daniel hesitated. "Because people were afraid. Because this family has spent decades building a clean image. And because some things were meant to stay hidden." Marcus stood up. "Not anymore." He spent the next few days digging deeper. Old letters, family records, newspaper clippings. He found more pieces, references to extra staff that were never on the books, mentions of certain family members who vanished mysteriously. Even old portraits had clues, faces painted over, names erased. It all pointed to one truth. The Caldwell family had spent generations hiding a crime, not just from the world but from themselves. And Marcus was the first to face it. He kept returning to the room. He began calling it Elijah's room. He placed flowers there, cleaned it gently, left the Bible open. He didn't know if Elijah had ever escaped. He didn't know how the story ended, but he knew it had to be told. And it all began with a whisper from a girl. Marcus decided he had to find her, not just to thank her but because he needed her to know. He believed her, and he was ready to listen. He hired a private investigator, described everything he remembered. Young black girl around 14 named Asha. Simple clothes. No invitation. Disappeared after the whisper. The investigator looked puzzled. "That's not much to go on," Marcus nodded. "I know, but something tells me she'll show up again," and deep down, Marcus wasn't sure if Asha was just a girl. Something about her felt bigger, like a spirit, a voice from the past, or maybe from the future. Either way, she had changed everything. And the door, once hidden behind a painting, now stood open, not just in the wall, but in Marcus's heart. Marcus had opened a door to the past, but he didn't know it would change his future. Every morning now he would wake up, and the first thing he'd think about was that room, the chains, the ledger, and the name Elijah. That name echoed in his mind like a soft drum beat. No matter how much money he had, no matter how successful his businesses were, Marcus couldn't forget what he had seen in that hidden room under his mansion. The mansion was still quiet and beautiful from the outside. The garden was green, the marble floors were clean, and the chandeliers sparkled when sunlight passed through the tall windows. But to Marcus, everything now felt like a mask. Behind that mask, the house had a scar. One afternoon, Marcus was sitting in the same ballroom where the party had taken place, the same spot where Asha, the mysterious girl, had whispered to him about the hidden door. He couldn't stop thinking about her. She had come without fear, told him the truth, and disappeared. And somehow, she knew about Elijah's room. Marcus had asked his security team again to check the footage from that night. "Maybe you missed something," he told them. They looked through every second of the recording, and then something strange happened. At the exact time Marcus remembered seeing Asha near the painting, the camera showed nothing. Just an empty space near the portrait. No girl, no movement, just people in the background laughing and drinking, unaware of anything strange. "She's not there," said the security chief. "But I saw her. She talked to me," Marcus replied. The security man looked confused. "Sir, I believe you, but there's no sign of her anywhere on the footage. It's like she walked through the crowd without being seen." Marcus didn't know what to say. He had spoken to her, heard her voice, felt the chill in his spine when she said, "You should open it." How could she not be on camera? That night, Marcus took the Bible from Elijah's cell and placed it on his nightstand. He opened the same page Elijah had written on. He traced the words with his finger. "My name is Elijah. I am still a person. God sees me." Marcus closed his eyes. He wanted to understand what Elijah had felt, what he had feared, how it must have felt to live like that. Locked away, forgotten, hidden by the powerful people upstairs. The next day, Marcus made a decision. He gathered his legal team, the historian Daniel, and a few trusted people from his company. He sat them down in his library and said, "I'm going to tell the world what I found." They stared at him, shocked. "Sir," his lawyer said carefully, "if you do that, the family name could be destroyed. The news media will attack your reputation. Investors might pull out of your businesses." "Are you sure?" Marcus nodded. "Yes. I don't care about the family name if it's built on suffering. People deserve to know the truth. We can't move forward if we're hiding the past." Daniel the historian looked up slowly. "You're brave, Marcus. Most people would bury this deeper." Marcus replied, "I almost did. But then Asha came." He told them about her, how she appeared, whispered about the door, and vanished. No camera caught her, no guest remembered her. It was as if she had come from nowhere. Yet she had told the truth. Maybe she was a spirit. "Maybe not," Marcus said. "But she led me to the truth." That week, Marcus called a press conference. Reporters from all over the country came. They expected him to talk about a new tech project or a donation. Instead, Marcus stood on the stage, holding Elijah's Bible in one hand and a copy of the ledger in the other. "I want to talk about something personal," he began. "Something painful." He spoke for 30 minutes, explaining everything. About the secret door behind the painting, the hidden room, the chains, the names in the book. He told the story of Elijah and read the message written in the Bible. He even described the mysterious girl who had led him there. "This house, this legacy, was built on the pain of others," he said. "I cannot change what happened, but I can choose not to stay silent about it." The room was silent when he finished. Reporters looked stunned. Some had tears in their eyes. Then the questions came. "Are you saying your family kept slaves after it was illegal?" "Yes," Marcus replied. "Will you open the room to the public?" "Yes, I want to turn it into a memorial." "Do you know who Asha is?" Marcus smiled gently. "No, but I hope she'll return." The story exploded across the country. News channels ran it 24/7. Social media flooded with reactions, some angry, some grateful, many in shock. People praised Marcus's honesty. Others questioned why he waited so long. But something else happened too. A few days after the press conference, Marcus received a letter. It was handwritten, in careful penmanship. No return address. Inside was a short message. "Thank you for listening. Elijah mattered, and so do you. Asha." Marcus stared at the letter for a long time. He ran his fingers over the name. No address, no phone number. But somehow it had reached him. He kept the letter in his wallet from that day forward. Soon, people began arriving at the mansion, not for parties, but to see the truth. Marcus had opened the secret room. He didn't decorate it. He didn't clean away the sadness. He kept it as it was, except for one thing. He placed Elijah's Bible in a glass case at the center, with a plaque that read, "My name is Elijah. I am still a person. God sees me." School children came on field trips. Descendants of enslaved families came and cried. Historians came to study the ledger. Activists came to pray. The room became a place of memory, a place of healing. Marcus stood quietly in the corner most days, watching people's reactions. Some thanked him. Some were silent. Some asked about Asha. He always said the same thing. "She found me when I needed her. Maybe she'll find you too." But something strange continued to happen. Sometimes, visitors said they saw a girl near the painting. A young black girl with braids, wearing a blue hoodie. She would smile gently, say nothing, and disappear into the crowd. Security never caught her on camera. But the stories kept coming. One teacher even swore the girl had taken her hand and whispered, "This room was always waiting for you." Marcus began to believe Asha wasn't just a girl. She was something more. A spirit, maybe. A guardian. A voice for those who had been forgotten. She had come to open a door, not just in the wall, but in his heart, and in the hearts of everyone who visited. The mansion changed forever. People stopped calling it the Caldwell Estate. They started calling it the House of Truth. The room became a symbol of honesty, memory, and courage. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was real. Marcus changed too. He started a foundation in Elijah's name. It gave scholarships to young black students. It funded research about hidden history. It helped restore forgotten graves of enslaved people. He gave up part of his fortune. He didn't regret it, because every time he walked into Elijah's room, he felt something different now, not just guilt, but peace, like someone had forgiven him. And sometimes, when the room was quiet and empty, he thought he could hear a whisper in the air. "Thank you for opening the door." Marcus would smile softly, place a hand over his heart, and whisper back, "Thank you for showing me where it was." And though he still didn't know where Asha had come from, or where she had gone, he knew this: she had never really left. Marcus was changing, And the world around him was changing too. Since the day he spoke to the media about the hidden room and the dark history of his family, people had started seeing him differently. Some still whispered behind his back, saying he should have kept the secret buried. But many others respected him more now. They saw a man who had everything: wealth, power, success, and still chose truth over silence. But even with all that praise, Marcus couldn't forget the weight of what he had found. The days felt different now. He would walk through his mansion and notice things he never paid attention to before. A dusty old painting in the hallway, an antique mirror, a locked drawer in a forgotten office. All these things felt like they could be hiding more secrets. He had lived there his whole life, but for the first time, it felt like he was truly seeing the place. The visitors to Elijah's room didn't stop. Every day, more people came. Schools, churches, activists, historians. They all wanted to see the room that had been hidden for over 100 years. Some cried, some prayed. Some just stood there in silence, taking in the pain that lived in those stone walls. Marcus was there almost every day. He didn't wear suits anymore. He'd wear simple clothes, help the guides, talk to the visitors, and sometimes even mop the floors when no one was looking. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just wanted to feel connected. The money didn't matter now. What mattered was healing the wound that had been ignored for generations. One day an old man came to visit. He wore a cap, walked with a cane, and had eyes filled with history. He introduced himself as Joseph Hawkins. Marcus greeted him kindly, offered a chair, and asked if he'd like a glass of water. Joseph smiled. "No, son, I didn't come for comfort. I came for truth." Then he said something that made Marcus freeze. "My great-great-grandfather was Elijah." Marcus didn't know what to say. He felt like the air had disappeared from the room. Joseph pulled out an old black-and-white photo from his coat pocket. It was worn, folded many times, but the face was clear. A young man standing near a tree holding a Bible. "That's him," Joseph said. "He escaped this place. He survived." Marcus stared at the photo. His hands trembled. "He wrote about it in letters," Joseph continued. "He said he was kept in a room beneath a house, that he had almost given up. But one night, he said he saw a girl in his dreams, a little girl with a bright smile who told him, 'Don't stop. Your story will matter.'" Marcus whispered, "Asha." Joseph looked at him. "You know about her?" Marcus told him everything. About the night of the party, the painting, the hidden door, the cold room, the chains, the ledger, the Bible, and the girl who led him there. "She saved me," Marcus said. "And maybe she saved him too." Joseph's eyes became glassy. He leaned forward. "Elijah lived a hard life after he escaped. He never talked about the pain, only about hope. He raised a family, became a pastor, taught his children to forgive, but never forget. And now, this place, this truth. I think he'd be proud of you." Marcus could barely speak. He had felt guilt, shame, and sorrow, but this was something new: connection. He gave Joseph a private tour of the room. They stood together in the cell where Elijah had once been locked. Joseph placed a hand on the wall and closed his eyes. "I can feel him here," he said softly. "But I don't feel anger. I feel peace." After that day, Marcus started inviting descendants of those in the ledger. They were hard to find, but not impossible. He hired a research team to go through every name, every record, every trace of the people his ancestors had hurt. He didn't want to hide behind a speech or a plaque. He wanted to give people a voice, a chance to speak, to grieve, to tell their stories. Some came with tears. Others came with anger. A few refused to speak to him, but many stayed. One woman named Rosa held up the ledger and pointed to a name. "This was my ancestor," she said. "Her name was Letty. She was taken from Virginia." I grew up hearing whispers about it, but no one believed me. Now I know I wasn't crazy." She hugged Marcus and whispered, "Thank you for not hiding." More letters came in, more visits, more interviews. The mansion began to transform. One part of it remained open as a museum of truth. The ballroom where Asha appeared became a gallery filled with artwork by descendants of the enslaved. The dining room displayed quotes from the ledger, rewritten by poets and historians to give them voice and power. Marcus had once thrown big parties in those rooms. Now they held silence, memory, and meaning, but Asha didn't return. He looked for her every day, hoped she would appear again in the hallway, or near the painting, or maybe just in a dream. But months passed and there was no sign. Then, one rainy evening, something strange happened. A storm had rolled in, dark and heavy. Most visitors had left. Marcus stayed behind to lock up the exhibit and check the gallery. He walked through the silent halls with only the sound of thunder outside. When he entered the ballroom, he stopped suddenly. The painting that had once hidden the door, it was glowing. Not brightly, just faintly, like the light from a candle behind it. He moved closer. The canvas shimmered for just a second, then stopped. But something was different. There was a note pinned to the frame. It was folded neatly. Marcus picked it up, hands shaking. There was no envelope, just a message written in simple handwriting. "The door you opened wasn't just in the wall. It was in time. Elijah's story was never lost. You just had to listen. More stories are waiting. Listen closely." Asha, Marcus sat down, stunned. She had come again. Even if he hadn't seen her, she had returned. And she had left a message. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what the note meant. More stories are waiting. He went back to the ledger and opened to the very last page. One name stood out. Amara, age 9. Small, silent. Belongs to the child's ward. Something about it felt wrong. Amara wasn't listed with a price. She was the only one without a number beside her name. He stared at the name for a long time, and then it hit him. Amara sounded close to Asha. Could it be? He went to the historian Daniel the next morning. "Can you look into the name Amara? She was listed in the ledger. No price, just child's ward." Daniel looked surprised. "That's unusual. Ward usually means someone under protection, or held for a special reason." They searched records, letters, diaries, anything. After days of digging, they found a page in an old journal. It was written by one of Marcus's ancestors. The girl Amara would not speak. She stares at the walls, whispers in her sleep, says strange things about the future. "We keep her in the lower room. She frightens the others." Marcus felt a chill. "The lower room? Elijah's room," he whispered. "Amara was a child. But maybe she became something more. Maybe Asha was Amara. Maybe her spirit had waited all these years for someone to listen. And now she wasn't alone." Marcus knew then that the house held more than just memory. It held energy, spirit, stories that were never told. And Asha had opened the first door. It was his job to open the rest. He turned Elijah's room into a center for storytelling. People from across the country sent letters, journals, objects, and family memories. The museum expanded. Each new room honored another, forgotten name. And sometimes, just sometimes, someone would say they saw a girl standing in the hallway. She never spoke, just smiled, and disappeared. Marcus would smile back, even if she wasn't there. He had found his purpose now, not as a billionaire, not as a businessman, but as a listener, a seeker of truth, a keeper of memory. He often stood in front of the painting, touching the place where the door had once been hidden. And in the silence, if he listened closely, he could almost hear the whisper again. "Open it." The night was quiet. Rain tapped gently against the mansion windows as Marcus stood alone in Elijah's room. The light above flickered softly, casting shadows on the stone walls. He had been coming here every evening now, not as a billionaire, not even as a public figure, but as a man seeking something deeper. He had listened to many stories, cried with strangers, held hands with families who discovered their ancestors in the ledger, but something inside him still felt unfinished. It was as if Asha had given him one final message, and he hadn't yet understood it fully. Her last note had said, "More stories are waiting. Listen closely." So Marcus listened. Every creak in the floor, every echo in the room. He listened, to silence as if it could speak. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance, he did something he hadn't done before. He turned off all the lights. He sat down on the cold stone floor where Elijah had once written in his Bible, and he closed his eyes. In the dark, without noise, without distractions, he whispered, "If there's more to be shown, show me." Minutes passed, nothing happened. Then, just as he was about to open his eyes, a soft breeze touched his neck. The room had no windows, no open doors, but something cold passed by him like a gentle breath. He turned quickly. And there, she was Asha. She was standing near the wall, wearing the same blue hoodie, the same soft expression. Her eyes held sadness but also peace. She didn't speak right away. She just stared at him, as if waiting for him to understand. "You came back," he said, standing up slowly. She gave a small nod. "You said more stories were waiting," Marcus continued. "What else do I need to see?" Asha walked toward the corner of the room and placed her hand on the stone. Then she pressed her palm flat against it, and the wall made a low grinding sound. A new doorway opened. It had been hidden behind the stone this entire time. Marcus stared, speechless. Asha looked at him, then turned and walked through the passage. He followed. The tunnel was narrow, the air thick with dust and time. The walls were covered in strange markings, names, dates, symbols. The further they went, the colder it got. After about 100 feet, they reached a small circular room. In the center, there was a wooden chest. It was old, covered in rusted iron bands and sealed with a large, heavy lock. Asha placed her hand on the lock. Without a key, it clicked and opened. Inside were hundreds of small pieces of paper, all folded, all yellow with age. Marcus picked up the first one and opened it. It was a letter, from a girl named Letty, written to her mother, describing her pain, her fear, and her dreams. He opened another. It was from a man named Ben, who had been forced to build the mansion's walls. He had written about his friend Elijah. Said Elijah used to sing hymns at night when the others cried. Letter after letter, story after story. These were voices of the forgotten, the lost, the silenced. "This is what you wanted me to find," Marcus whispered. Asha nodded again. Then, finally, she spoke. "These are the stories that were buried, not by time, but by choice. Now they can be heard." Marcus looked around. The room felt like a soul. It was small, dark, but full of light in the form of memory. Every letter was a life. "I'll tell them," he said. "Every single one." Asha gave a small smile. It was the last thing he saw before she faded, like smoke into the air, like a candle blowing out. She was gone again. But this time Marcus knew she had left him with everything he needed. The next day, Marcus gathered his team and told them about the new room and the letters. They were shocked, amazed, emotional. They helped him catalog the letters carefully, each one handled with gloves and respect. The chest was placed in a secure glass box in the mansion with a sign above it, the voices beneath. Letters that time couldn't silence. News of the letters spread quickly. People came from all over the world to read them. Schools built entire lessons around them. Writers used them in books. Artists painted the lives they described. One letter in particular went viral. It was from a child named Amara. Yes, Amara. In the letter, Amara wrote about seeing things no one else could. She wrote, "Sometimes I dream of tall buildings and people, holding light in their hands. I see a man who cries for us. I tell him to open the door. I think he will. One day, I think he will." The internet exploded with theories. Some said she was a prophet. Some believed she was Asha. Some believed Amara and Asha were one soul in two forms. But Marcus didn't care what others believed. He knew in his heart they were the same. After a year, the mansion had completely transformed. No longer a home of the rich and powerful, it had become a home of memory, truth, and justice. Marcus rarely attended business meetings anymore. Instead, he led tours, spoke to children, answered questions, and, most of all, listened. He listened to people like Rosa, who brought her grandmother to the mansion and watched her cry at the sight of her family name in the ledger. He listened to young writers who wanted to create plays and poems from the letters. He listened to people who came not to learn, but to heal. And slowly, Marcus himself healed. He had lived with shame, but now he lived with purpose. He had been a man of money. Now he was a man of meaning. One evening, as he was locking up, he saw something that made him stop. A painting had been added to the wall outside the Elijah room. He didn't know who had done it. No one claimed it. It showed a young girl with braids and a blue hoodie, standing in front of a glowing door. Above her head were the words, "Sometimes it takes a whisper to open a world." Marcus smiled. He didn't need to ask who the artist was. Asha had come one last time. Years passed. The mansion was renamed the House of Voices. People came not just to remember the past, but to speak for the future. Marcus grew older, slower, but every day he still walked to Elijah's room and read a letter out loud, even when no one was there, because he knew someone was always listening. On the final day of his life, Marcus sat in the stone room holding Elijah's Bible. He whispered, "Thank you, Asha. Thank you, Elijah. Thank you, Amara. You changed me." Then he closed his eyes. When the staff found him, he had a peaceful smile on his face. On the floor beside him was a new note. "You listened. Now rest. We'll take it from here." No one saw who wrote it, but everyone knew who had. And in the years that followed, children who visited the mansion often said they saw a girl in the hallway. She would smile at them, point toward the painting, and vanish. Her story wasn't over. It had only just begun.